the introduction. It's lovely to be here with you. And I'm going to speak to you a message that's one of my all-time favorites. It's probably one of the most requested things I get to talk about around the world. And it's called The 6 Rooms That Are Missing from God's House. There's probably more than 6 rooms that are missing from God's house, but these 6 will be enough for us to be going on with and think about today. Jesus said in John 14:1, "In my Father's house are many rooms." We just talked about the kitchen here that you're adding, or the enlargement of that. "In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so," he said, "I would have told you." Proverbs 24:3, "By wisdom a house is built. Through understanding it's established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful things." By the way, many of those rare and beautiful things are you. You are a rare and beautiful thing that are filling rooms in God's house, and you are present in rooms in other people's lives. And it's a beautiful thing to have you in their room. I pastored, as some of you know, for 32 years in the same church in England, and have been visiting churches around the world like yours and others for over 30 years. So I have a lot of observations about my church I was building with my team, and churches around the world that I wasn't building, but I was participating, contributing to, as I am here to your house here today. And I began to make a lot of observations about things I felt that were blind spots to us, perhaps, that were completely missing in my church that I was building at home in England and churches around the world. And these 6 rooms commonly came up as the top ones that were missing generally in churches around the world. Not all of them. Some were present, and some were more present than others. Some were too much present, perhaps, than others. But it got my attention, and that's where this message came from. I want to say before we get into the 6 rooms, again to remind you, perhaps you don't need it, but just in case you do, because I think I need this reminder constantly, that Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many rooms." This, the church, is the Father's house. It's not your house. It's not my house. It's not the leader's house. It's not the people on stage's house. It's not the older members of the church house. It's not white people's house or black people's house. It's not older people's house or younger people's house. It's not a denomination's house. It is not the government's house. It is not the nation's house. It is not the culture's house. It is not tradition's house. It is not the worship team's house, and so on and so on. I say all that because I think sometimes God's house gets taken over by other people who make it their house. And when I make God's house my house, I create a house after my image rather than his. And this happens all the time in lots of things in life, and we have blind spots about it, and because it's blind spotted to us, we don't realize we have built a wonky house. We built a house with our what's called implicit biases, things I don't know that I don't know. Building houses for God that we say are God's, that actually if you interviewed God about it, he would say, "I don't recognize that. I don't know what that is. That's not me. I think that's your personality. I think that's middle-aged white guy stuff. I think that is from your poverty lack mentality background stuff. I think that is age and stage of life stuff. I think that is your trauma that's building that house. I think the background you came from and the triggers you have about what happened in your past are making you build a kind of house that protects you from those triggers But I don't recognize that. That's not my house. That's your house. So this is God's house. It's the Father's house. And it's just good to remind ourselves now and then that some of the stuff we throw into the house and insist is God's house isn't. This isn't Mary or Martha's house, where Jesus loved going to their house, didn't he? Martha has had so much bad press in the church for 2,000 years. She's the one that was in the kitchen, busy, stressing out, worrying about the food, while Mary was at the feet of Jesus, worshiping, pouring oil on his feet. And Martha, Martha, Jesus said, has been perceived as a rebuke for being fussy and doing drama, and Mary's chosen the better part. So we've used that passage to teach. We don't want a Martha house. We want a Mary house filled with devotion, love, worship, where our main thing is to sit at Jesus' feet. Well, I want you to know that before you came to sit at Jesus' feet in worship today and pour worship oil on him, Martha was here early, opening the building, putting the lights on. And the oil that goes on Jesus' feet from Mary is no more special or sacred than the oil needed in the kitchen to make dinner. So we got to have a house that's built on Mary and Martha. We've got to have churches that are built on love and devotion, and also practical, organizational, smart, operating well. Everything's taken care of. We're handling finances well. We're building a great culture. We're building a good aesthetic building. We're using media well. All of that is behind the scenes Martha stuff. I've been to churches that are all Mary and no Martha. They're the ones that forget to pick you up at the airport. Because they're not organized, don't pay attention to detail, forget stuff that matters, and people get let down because they're just away with the fairies, pouring oil on Jesus' feet. All right. Let me jump into the first room that I think is missing. A panic room. I never heard of a panic room till the Jodie Foster movie years ago called The Panic Room. Great film if you haven't seen it. Now, rich people build these into their homes for fear they'll be raided and, attacked in their homes. So they build a room, and it's like a bulletproof, bomb-proof, like a human safe that you run into. The idea of a panic room. When I saw that movie and kept that idea in my head in the years following, there's been times in my life when in the church, in my leadership, in my life, I would have welcomed a panic room. Instead, I got on my motorcycle and took off to get away from people and get away from all the stuff that was doing my head in and get away from the exhaustion and all the energies that drain us that are to do with being humans in life together, and especially in leadership as the one that's giving out all the time, and many of you are in that role in life. So, a panic room. When I was pastoring, I realized that when people are in a panic condition in their lives, and you've all been there, and some of you are there today, that is, you're going through something that's scary. It's making you anxious. It's affecting your mental health, your emotional health. You're not sleeping well. You're hypervigilant all the time because something's going on in your life. These people don't like being in church because it's hard to come to a place that's happy and clappy, inspirational, and the energy is upbeat and positive and smiley. That's a million miles from how you feel. So you kind of panicking a little bit, and your panic gets worse around that energy. It exaggerates the fact that I don't feel safe here. I feel they're going to make me be something I don't want to be. They're going to make me perform to fit in with the happy culture. And I don't feel that. So what I realized was that when I had those people like that in my church that felt overwhelmed and depressed and were drowning, suicidal even, on the run, as it were, from life, they didn't come to church because we didn't have a panic room. We didn't have room in our culture to say, hey, if you're here today in a panic state, as it were, battling things in your life that are making you depressed, panicky, stressful, anxious, and you need to come late to the service so you don't interact with people, sit at the back. You need to rush out early so no one comes and hugs you and shakes your hand. We're building that kind of church here. It's cool. One of the things that happened in Levitical law, which is fascinating to me, and I think it's some version of panic room that Moses built for people. God told Moses to designate 6 cities of refuge. These were places you could run and escape to if you're accused of a crime that perhaps you didn't commit, or you did commit but there was mitigating circumstances, and before the mob lynched you, you could run to a city of refuge. Once you got there, you were immune from prosecution and immune from punishment and judgment until the trial or a hearing could be arranged. So there were 6 cities of refuge where people in crisis, people that were panicking, could run to, if you like, a panic room city. A city of refuge it was called. And I think we need to build cities of refuge in our churches for people that are battling some form, often, of PTSD. That's making them agitated, panicky. And so what happens if we don't build that culture here, where you feel seen and you feel it's okay, and where I, as the leader, I'm very open with you when I'm in my panic room moments. So I would say to our church, look, I'm going through something in my life. Our granddaughter, I have 8 grandchildren. Our youngest one got cancer when she was 1 year old. She was diagnosed with cancer. So it plunged our family into hell. Some of you have been there and are there right now. And my heart and prayers go out to you. And we were that family. So sometimes you go through stuff as a leader. It's not my job to get up here and fake it. Because if you see me do that, it makes you think that's what you're supposed to do. It makes you think that our faith is too fragile for me to be real with you up here. And I don't mean Jerry Springer stuff. We're not up here to, just let it all hang out. But we're here to be real and to say, guys, I'm in a panic situation right now. Here's why. Pray for me. I'm doing the best I can. I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing, although I may need to take some time out and so on and so on. It's that. It's some version of that we've not been good at in churches. And so what people do, because it's not a room for them that's available, they just leave and create their own panic room at home or wherever they disappear to for months. I said to people on my team, hey, where's so-and-so? Because that church was large, and I couldn't keep track of everybody one-on-one. And the more you travel and move around, they're not there every week. But I'd come and say, where's so-and-so? Oh, I think they're going through something. They haven't been around for 2 or 3 months. Then they'd just reappear one Sunday. I'm like, why, where have you been? And they'd say some version of I was going through something. And I thought, wow, if you have to leave God's house to go through something, what kind of house are we building? The second kind of room I think we need is a messy room. You got one of those in your house? If you open that cupboard, it's going to be an avalanche. It's like, I think we need a messy room in God's house. And what I mean by a messy room is somewhere where you can come in your untidy seasons, messy, chaotic, what the hell's going on, seasons of your life. Some version of that, I think we need a messy space that's awkward, uncomfortable, disruptive, vulnerable, disagreeable, where you can come in a messy stage in your life when you don't know what's going on, what you're experiencing. Sometimes you're transitioning from one stage of life to another. Sometimes you're processing all kinds of stuff that's going on that no one knows about in the church. They know about a little bit, but not the more complicated stuff that you don't talk about. It's just messy. Sometimes you would describe your life as, I don't know, it just feels a mess right now. It doesn't seem a cool thing to say as a spirit-filled believer. But it's just a mess. So I think we need a messy room that says, hey, you can come in your mess. And you know why we don't come in our mess? Because the church is obsessed with fixing people. I want to build, and did build, the kind of church where you could come in your mess and be completely left alone. Isn't that a beautiful thing? I had to uncouple. It was counterintuitive to me to not try to fix people. When I started busing people in from our inner city, it's a long story, but anyway, I started busing people in from the worst parts of town. In our city, you call them it's government housing, project areas, council estates in our country. Our city had thousands and thousands of people living on these massive council estates. No one came to our church from there. Our church was too white and too middle class. But that wasn't typical of our city. And I wanted to change that. So the church was in the city, but the city was not in the church. Except in our preaching and theology where whosoever will may come as you are. But nobody did. And I thought, this is like false advertising. We got stuff in the shop window that's not on the shelves in the shop. I'm not cool with that. So I said, okay, let's go and find the people that are different to us, and I'm going to bust these people in. And I was busting in 500 people a week of the worst kinds of people you could imagine as people are rated. These were prostitutes, drug dealers, criminals, ex-offenders, gang leaders, all kinds of crazy I was busing in. Now, looking back, I could have probably done it tidier. I could have probably reached them in some outreach project on Tuesday night somewhere and not messed with the Sunday thing. But what I did was I put the cat among the pigeons. So our church was a mess for about 3 years. It was just a mess. It was just a riot. So if you would normally come to church in your Sunday best and sit with your friends and family who got you a coffee before you arrived and kept you a seat, and you sit there because that's your favorite spot and you sit with your family and friends, I'm busting in people who, when you arrive, they're already sat there and they look like people who'd kill you. So our church had a messy room overnight. These people's lives were a huge mess. But here's what I found out. Some people wear their mess in their lives and lifestyles and habits. Other people are dressed up and look all full of the Holy Spirit who are in a bigger mess. So I stopped judging people by their appearance, which we say we don't do, but we do, and thought, no, I'm going to bust these people in because they're no more messed up than most of us. It's just that we're hiding it better. And because God sees the heart, it doesn't look at the exterior, I think God's cool with whoever shows up, you know. And out of those criminals and crazies I bust in, I formed a church. And many of our best leaders I've ever known came from that crowd. Number 3, we need an X-ray room. An X-ray room. A place, we need a room in God's house for real talk. Where Jesus can say to Peter, you are completely out of order. Get in line. You will deny me 3 times before tonight. So why are you telling me you'll love me forever? No, you won't. You need to get behind me, Satan. All these blunt conversations Jesus had with his team and with others, what happened to that? What happened to that culture in the church? I don't mean being rude or careless or over-confrontational or inappropriate. I don't mean that. But I mean just a place for real conversation. People said to me, what would you have done if you weren't a pastor and preacher? I said, I don't know. I probably would have liked law. I'd have been a good lawyer. You'd want me on your side if you were in trouble. I'd be a lawyer because I've got a forensic mind for detail. So I'd be good for a lawyer. Or a doctor. They said a doctor. I said, yeah, I don't mean like a general practitioner. I mean like a surgeon or something. Because if I was a doctor, I'd be like Dr. House. I'd be like, it's this, this, and this, get out of here. So my bedside manner wouldn't be great. Because this X-ray room, I felt, has been missing, and it's cost us so much time beating around the bushes, treading on eggshells, not saying it like it is. So I think we need a room in God's house that is real talk. Like, MRI scan, X-ray level conversations, where we say, you know what? I think this is what's really going on here, don't you? Can we just get real here? And we kind of get to it and we talk about it then. But because we don't feel safe in God's house, we don't have that level of open, frank conversation. When I was pastoring, people would come for counseling. And they were very happy to come for counseling for weeks on the same thing and think that we'd help somebody. And in counseling, I would say early on, well, I think we need to talk about this. And then they never come back. Because they want to talk and talk and talk about things around this, but not this, and call it being helpful. And I thought, I'm going to die of exhaustion talking about the peripheral things instead of the thing. I don't want to build that room into our house. So I think the church is an X-ray room. I think God's house needs a transparency room, a room where we are open and get to the point. Would be a good thing to experiment with, at least building in that room to the Father's house. You all okay? I don't mind being in a church where people don't shout amen and fall out in the spirit. I'm really cool with that. There's good listening and there's bad listening. Your church is good listening. Good listening is when people are quiet, but they're kind of paying attention and leaning in. It's good listening. Bad listening is, are we done yet? I was in a church once in America. Never happened to me before, and I thought, this is not good listening. And there were two women in the second row knitting. As I was speaking, knitting. And that became a metaphor for the whole church, because they were used to the spitting and sweating and shouting preaching. And I get up and I'm chatty, conversational, and I think they thought, okay, get the knitting out. Here's one of them. But that's not you. Okay, number 4, I think the Father's house needs a playroom. Playroom. We don't have enough fun in God's house because we take everything far too seriously. We're bearing the burdens of the nations on our shoulders. We make ourselves the 4th member of the Trinity. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and me. Without me, those 3 won't manage. So we unnecessarily burden ourselves and we become serious and we become too intense. We take ourselves too seriously. We need a playroom in the Father's house. In these grand homes, if you visit grand homes, we have castles and palaces all across England, as you guys know if you visited. You have some versions of that here. The bigger the house, if you've noticed, the more rooms the house has. And the more unusual rooms the house has to reflect the largeness of the life of the owners. Have you ever been to a ballroom in a house? So it's a house, but the house has a ballroom. That ballroom is testament to the fact that this is a house of play and fun and entertainment and relaxing and enjoying yourself. So they build a room dedicated to that form of hospitality that they're involved in. And that home becomes known as a place where people come and have a ball, literally, and dance and have fun. We need more laughter. And do you know the word daft here? Do you use the word daft? He's just daft. We have a saying in England about somebody that's really, crazy and playful and does stupid things. And we have a saying, he's as daft as a brush. She's as daft as a brush. I don't even know what it means, but we say it all the time. You know these sayings you have? Meaning that it's hard to explain what she's like, but she's just crazy. She's just nuts. Now, some of you were crazy, nuts, wacky, weird, eccentric, odd, hilarious. Then you got saved. Now it's like, or it's like that in church anyway. We want you to go back and pick all that wackiness up and bring it here to the house. We need wacky, crazy. I mean, I was busting in crazy. Seriously. Every single Sunday, it was like, I don't know what could happen today with them in the room. I mean, I went through about a year of heckling every Sunday from people that were off their heads with whatever they were taking or drinking or, we had a team that would escort them out and help them but all kinds of stuff. I remember a homeless guy. It was summer. We're busting people in. And, in our building was a huge 2,000-seater. And at the top, overlooking the auditorium, was a huge cafe that we built in. And there were fridges, the staff were in and out of the fridges. And you could go, as a member of the public, you could go into a fridge. You weren't supposed to, but that's how we built churches, assuming nobody will steal our stuff. By the way, if nobody comes to your church, you'll steal your stuff. Your church is too safe. And that's just a metaphor. And stealing may not be a big, issue around here, but some other thing. If nobody's in your church that would drop the F-bomb, your church is too safe. I'm being serious. It's too safe. It's too tidy. It's too in my image, perhaps. So I'm busting in the F-bomb stealing crowd. So this guy, I was told, that guy stole an ice cream from the freezer. Homeless guy. So I thought, this is hilarious. So I just thought, the security team or the ushers would deal with it. I thought, I want to meet this guy. This is amazing. So I went to meet him. His name was John. I said, hey, John. It was in the lobby. It was summer, warm. I said, hey, John, I hear you stole ice cream. I said, you can have ice cream free here, don't you? I said, anything here to you is free. We know you've got no money and you've had a tough time. I said, so ice cream's expensive, I said. I haven't stolen ice cream. Who said I stole ice cream? Liars. He said, I'm sick of people lying about me. While he's saying that to me, ice cream is coming out from the bottom of his trousers. Because it's under his coat and it's melting before he can get to eat it. It's coming down his leg, onto his shoes. And I'm watching it coming down his leg. I'm thinking, he's doing amazing to not go. They were so hilarious and dragged me into play. These people were so hilarious. If you didn't go that way, you'd break down with a nervous breakdown of what could happen next. I think we need a playroom. I think we need daftness. And I think we need foolishness. One of the great gifts, by the way, and any grandparents in here, can I see your hands? God bless you. We have 8 grandchildren, and they all live 5 minutes from us. And we live in a big, old 17th century farmhouse in the countryside. All my grandkids are kind of 10, 15 minutes away. It's a recipe for disaster. Because we have random grandchildren invasions. And I put gates on my property once I got wise to this to keep them out. But because when all you grandparents know, when grandkids show up, it's like, I'm here. Drop everything. Don't care what you're doing. I have arrived. One of the gifts of grandchildren is they teach you how to play again in midlife. Because we play less as we get older is well researched, especially men. Men play less as they get older. And you say, well, I play golf. No, you don't play golf. You are way too competitive in your golfing to be enjoying it. I'm talking about play, fun, laughter, not take yourself too serious. And I love that about Josh. He's a very playful person. And you should celebrate that about him and about people in your life that bring that to you. So we need a playroom culture in the church too. Some people will not join God's house when they see there's no room for play here, because some people really need that in their lives, because their lives are awful and their lives are full of intensity and drama and stress. So to come to the Father's house and find a playfulness in the culture is a beautiful thing. 5, we need a changing room. A changing room. I put a locker room image on screen because I mean that kind of changing room, not one in a retail store. A place where we can reinvent ourselves. A place where we can morph and change and upgrade to the next version of us without having to leave the church, because people that parked up on an old version of us are uncomfortable with what's going on for us right now. Because you are not the same person through your life, nor should you be. And in the church, we've not been good with that. We expect people to be who they were when we met them years ago. So for you to come to this church for 10 years and 3-4 years into after we got to know that version of you, now you're going through a complete life shift and change because you're growing and flourishing and reading and being curious. And that energy in you is leading you to become a more interesting, more in-depth, balanced, rounded, whole, interesting, fascinating human. But some of that's very threatening to people who are parked up on the old you and parked up on the old them. And what happens is that the more you begin to change and grow on the inside, your appearance starts to change. I've had a man bun now for about, 6-7 years, I don't know. But I remember when I grew my hair long, and normally I'd go and get it cut. And my wife or my family would say, "You getting your hair cut?" I said, "No, I'm going to grow it." Then I started tying a little ponytail. It was a little bit too Miami Vice. A little bit too drug dealer. And it was tied low. So I tied it up high. And the sarcastic remarks I got was interesting. So what we do is when we get that, we get our hair cut. Because the man bun, or the change of hairstyle, or the change of glasses, or the change of clothing, or the wearing of some man beads, or I started wearing hats recently. Do you know what flat caps are here? Do you know what a flat cap is? You know, Peaky Blinders? A what? A golf hat. There you go. I was in a store the other day in Atlanta looking for a flat cap. Nobody in the store knew what I was talking about. It's like speaking Chinese. Do you have a flat cap? What? A what? You mean a baseball cap? No, a flat cap. Huh. You mean a sun hat? No, a flat cap. I had to Google a flat cap and show him in the shop. I mean that. Oh, those. Nah. There's a niche for a flat cap market in this country. Watch out. Started wearing flat caps. Then got another incoming surge of, sarcastic, funny, but, the energy of it is, midlife crisis? What's going on for you? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm just upgrading my image. This image now feels more a match for what's happening inside me. It's hard to stay the same externally when you're changing so rapidly internally, because who you see in the mirror doesn't align with who you are inside anymore. Who you are externally is often who you have been permitted to be, by family and friends and spouse and culture and job and where you work and so on and so on. So I think a changing room allows you to not be the same person through your life. And we all enjoy that about each other, or we should. The problem is that when you change too much for some people, they start to criticize you or make snipey remarks, because what's happening is you are reminding them of how much they need to do that. So they can't celebrate your new hairstyle. They can't celebrate your weight loss, a new wardrobe option that you have now. They can't celebrate that because they feel insecure by the work you're doing, because it shows up the work that they're not doing. And if that can't be fixed and be improved upon, what also have to happen is you have to have new relationships that align with the new versions of you that you become. We want the same people to track with us through life. That's possible if we all keep growing. If we don't, it becomes what the Bible calls unequal yoking, where we're doing life together, but one begins to outgrow the other, and it starts to become a tension and a clash, and the relationship isn't fun anymore. Nobody's done anything wrong. It's just that someone is growing more and differently and quicker than the other person, and one feels threatened, and the other can't struggle with maintaining that energy in them all the time. Keeping them happy, assuring them I still love you is exhausting. So we separate, and it's all good. Number 6, and finally, y'all okay? We need a spare room. Does your house have a spare room? I think in the church, we have been good building rooms for babies that we have born to us, new believers, new converts. Those born in the house, as it were, we used to call them. Obviously, they're our kids. We got room for them. We expect that. We want that. We've done okay with people we've adopted, people from other churches that join our church, adoptions. Let's call them adoptions. You leave that church, join this church. We welcome you. We hope you can adapt and be okay here. We're good with adoptions. What we're not good with is foster care. We're not good at loving people who aren't staying. And that's an indictment on us. We've not built a room where you can come to this church, our church that we built, and from the moment you arrive, we know you're not staying. For whatever reason, you're in transit, you're moving through. And what we used to do is, I think we used to limit our attention and resources towards people who we felt were just taking, but weren't putting anything back in because they weren't staying. They came with this temporary mentality, so we treated them with a temporary mentality. And a spare room is that we build a room in our churches, a room in God's house. We build in our culture room for people that are here today. You're visiting, you may be here for a couple of months, 6 months, a year. And we don't want you to fake to us that you're staying when you know you're not. We want it to be authentic, real. So you're telling us we want you to feel comfortable from the beginning to tell us, hey, I'm just going through something right now. I need a city of refuge perhaps. I'm just here for a while and I'll be staying for, I don't know, a few months, you may not know. And I want to build a room where you feel, that's cool, we're expecting you. Come, enjoy. We have Airbnb too. We have Airbnb spaces in church. That's what we need. Because here's what I want. I want people that are, and by the way, you foster carers in here, foster love is a superpower. Wow. To love kids that you have to then let go is a superpower. So every foster carer in here, you are amazing. but we've not been good with foster care love in the church. We want to love people that are staying, that we get something back from. So our love, therefore, is really transactional. I do this for you, you do that for me, or it's a no deal. So I think we need a spare room to love, support, serve people who are moving on. Because here's what I want. I want when they move on from my church, I want wherever they go next for them to speak well of God's house. They may never go to another church, but if they came to my church for a few months, I want them to know they were loved, seen, welcomed, expected, equipped. So that 10 years from now, whenever the word church comes up, they'll have a happy memory of a foster care that they had in my church, in your church, years earlier in their lives when they most needed that from someone to get back on their feet, recover from something, get strong again, to move on in life. There you go. 6 rooms. You may have others that you want to add when you think about it. Go ahead and do that and think about that. What room could you be part of adding? Here's the other amazing thing. So many rooms that we don't have in God's house are because nobody's here yet that knows we need that room. Every new person that comes will bring the awareness to us that we're lacking rooms. And they can't bring people like them until we add the room that they need and people they're going to reach need to bring people to. So listen to people that come that are new that say, is this available in this church? And it might not be. It might not be the time for that and so on and so on. You may not have the skill set for that. But new people are a great awareness raiser of rooms that we're blind spotted about that they need.